Hi, my name is Tyler Mowry, and welcome to the Writer's Mind Podcast, Episode 10. Okay, welcome to another episode. Welcome, Patreon members, to episode 10. So today, what I want to talk about is the concept of risk. So, I'm sure you're familiar with this idea. Risk is the probability that something bad is going to happen based upon something that you are doing or just in general a potential risk out there. Risk is uncertainty around a particular objective, whatever that objective is. It is not a certainty that it will work out or be what you want. There is risk involved in all sorts of areas of life, in your career, in where you live, and who you interact with, in the people you decide to be with, in a relationship. There's all sorts of risk. Risk is everywhere in our lives. Now, one thing that you see just in history and in different career fields is that those who take on a certain level of necessary or important risk end up getting what they want or getting into a particular position in their career, or having a particular relationship that they wanted to be in, much more than those who are risk averse, people who don't look for risk or don't take on risk. And so risk is a very valuable part of our lives. It's interesting, if you have parents in your life, many times parents try to train their children to be risk averse. They don't train them to go after certain opportunities. They train them to stick with what works. They train them to do what they did. And I think that what this does many times at a young age is it begins to instill within us this idea that risk should be avoided in your general life, that you shouldn't take it on, and that you will be, tremendously harmed by certain things that are deemed as risky, right? And that's another thing too, where a lot of things in your life, other people look at and say, oh, this is a risky thing. And then they tell you, because it is a risky thing, don't do it, If you want to be a writer, they'll tell you that most people who want to write professionally don't make it, which is true. And then they say because of that, it is risky. Or if you are trying to start a business or if you are trying to invest, people will tell you, well, most businesses fail. It is a risky thing to do. People will tell you, well, you can lose money in investments. It is a risky thing to do. Or even in relationships, right? When you enter into a relationship, you are taking a risk. You're taking a risk that this person cares about you, that they have your best interests at heart, that they won't cheat on you or harm you in some other way. And so there's all sorts of, risks involved in life. And so what happens is other people tell us that things are risky, and then we avoid those things because we don't want to be harmed or we don't want to lose. And we like how things are, or even if we don't like how things are, we don't want things to be worse. And so we decide to stay where we are because it's better for things to just be how they are, rather than the chance that they will get worse. Now, I don't like this, and this really plays into episode 9 and what I just talked about in episode 9, if you're coming straight from there, which is this idea that when you are told that things are risky from other people, it's important that you understand what they mean, and it's important that you do your own research and develop your own point of view on a particular risk, right? So I talked about reasoning from first principles, and that if you can reason from first principles, then you can have a better understanding of why you would do a certain thing, or why you would look at a certain thing as risky or not risky, or, it allows you to do your own creative thinking. It allows you to step out and figure out exactly how you want to handle a certain project or a certain task, and how you want to do things. And so this is related to risk, right? If you are looking at investing, for example, and people will tell you, oh, the stock market, is risky, you can lose your money, or, other types of investments are risky, you can lose your money. I have a Bitcoin book right here. People will tell you Bitcoin is risky, you can lose your money, right? So in investing, it's important that at some point you say, okay, well, let me see what this thing is about, right? Because as long as you are letting other people say, oh, this is a risky thing, and you don't do any of your own research, you are reasoning by analogy, like I talked about in the last episode, and you're saying, oh, okay, well, this person that I trust for whatever reason says that this thing is risky, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, so now what you need to do is examine that and then say, okay, well, let me do my own research, and then let me see if I can gain a understanding of how this process works, and then I can gauge whether or not this is actually risky, or whether or not it is a level of risk that I can tolerate for a reward that could potentially be there, right? And so, in looking at investing, for example, you can look at, stock market, and you can say, okay, well, there are certain companies that I don't think are going bankrupt, or that will be worth more in the future. And so I can make investments based upon my, now newly learned understanding of the stock market, for example, and then say, okay, I can do this. Or you can look at different kinds of investments. You can look at real estate, and you can say, okay, well, I can make a real estate investment. I can buy a home or something. And once you have your own knowledge on that subject, you can then decide what level of risk you're able to handle, and you can decide how much you want a particular potential reward, right? Because that's what it's all about. You are weighing potential rewards against the risk of failure. And you can relate this back to, pursuing a career in writing, which is absolutely, there is risk involved in, pursuing storytelling in really any field, whether that's, trying to be an author, trying to write books, or trying to be a screenwriter. There is risk. There are not infinite spots, there are, but at the same time, you can also do what other people don't. You can, carve your own path if you desire to. And the way that people carve their own path, or they do their own thing, is they reason from first principles, right? People look at the world of screenwriting, and they say, okay, so I want to do this professionally. How do people do that? What are the necessary, first principle elements of this to then do this? Okay, well, I need to be good at writing. Okay, so let me do that. Okay, well, if I don't have $10 million myself, I need to be involved in the industry and make connections and be of value to other people, so that then I can sell my work and have my work be respected by other people. Okay, so now you can say, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, I can work in the industry. I can have assistant jobs, or I can enter into different ways, or you can try to do it a different way, right? You can try to do the writer-director Jim Cummings is an interesting indie director and writer. He's done a couple films. Let me quickly pull this up. So Jim Cummings he directed and starred in and wrote a movie called Thunder Road, which was crazy. Actually, you should go and look at what he did on Thunder Road. it's wild. He worked on so many elements of that film. He also made a short film for it, and wrote, directed, and starred. And if I'm not wrong, I believe he also was involved in doing the score for it as well. Let me see here. Anyways, I'm pretty sure that he was also involved in the score for it as well. And so he just did a ton for this story. And what he did was he realized that, okay, well, if I want to make a movie, I can make one. There's other ways to do this. Okay, what do you need for a movie? You need a good script, you need a cast, you need a crew, and you need funding, right? So those are those are the base first principles of a movie. And so what he did was he was like, okay, well, I can get that together. How do I get that together? Well, I can make a short film and get some funding through that. I can, show people that I can do this seriously. I can, generate some hype, generate some interest, bring people on board to produce it and these sorts of things. And that's what he did. And so what he did was, rather than taking on the risk of going in the traditional career path, he decided to take on a different kind of risk, one that he had more control over, which was trying to make this film himself and then, building his career off of that versus waiting for someone else to buy his story and give him a job and going in that direction. And so I think this is important to remember that when you are thinking about risk, there's also levels of uncontrollable risk and controllable risk, right? So you really don't have a ton of control over certain elements in, the film program, like the film industry, or what people you particularly meet. But what you do have control over is you do have control over, you coming to a city where there's a film industry, you meeting people, you constantly writing and improving your craft, you looking for jobs, right? And so you can radically decrease your risk level by taking action that gives you more power over your world. Now, there's also certain things that you cannot control. For example, the coronavirus. There's no way that you could have controlled that, of course. So if you move to Los Angeles and you're trying to start a career in screenwriting, you don't have any control over the fact that the film industry was essentially shut down for 8 or 9 months. And so, there are certain things there are certain pieces of uncontrollable risk. And so it's important to realize that while there is risk out there, it is up to you to understand what that risk really is, and it is up to you to understand the first principles of whatever you're trying to do. And when you hear statistics like, 98% of writers, never sell anything, or 1 out of every 10 businesses succeeds, you have to say, okay, well, one, this is averages. They're just looking at everyone and saying this, and then you can also that's really interesting. This idea that you hear this a lot. You hear stuff like, oh, most writers fail, or most businesses fail, or you have like a 1% chance of being a professional writer or starting a business and having it survive your first year. But what happens is there's a lot of people out there that are not actually doing the necessary work to make things happen. They're not reasoning from first principles. They're not analyzing a plan. They're not taking control. They're not taking action. And so when you start to pull some of those factors and bring them into your control, then you realize that, okay, it's actually a lot less luck or probability and a lot more of your ability to take action and take control and make the moves necessary to get what you want. And so then you realize that, well, it's not actually like that. It's a lot. The probability of success is a lot higher when you have more control over what's going on, when you understand the risks, when you are reasoning from first principles, and when you are consistently working, and when you are placing yourself in consistently advantageous situations to get your desired goal. So people are so risk averse and they hate themselves for it because they sit at home and they work a job they hate and they think about wanting to do this other thing, or they think about wanting to try to be a writer or try to impress their worldview onto someone else and have meaning in life essentially, but they are so risk averse because they don't understand these different areas of life. And knowledge goes such a long way in your ability to stand on your own 2 feet and say, okay, I can take on this risk. I will take the responsibility for it if it fails, and I'm going to move forward. And on the other hand, people overestimate the level of how risky certain things are, right? Let's say that you want to be a screenwriter. Let's say that you are in college, you're in film school or whatever, you're 20, 21, 22, something like that. And you're like, oh, it's really risky, but this is what I want to do, but it's so risky. I don't know if I can do it. It's like, okay, well, let's walk through what happens if it doesn't work out. If it doesn't work out, you end up working a job, some other job that you didn't want, and you end up, not being a professional writer. You end up doing something else, and that's the worst case scenario, essentially. And then you might say, oh, well, I'll waste 3 years or 4 years or 5 years going after this passion if I do this. Okay, well, you're wasting your time. On the other hand, if you are always thinking like, oh, what if, right? This idea that you are not living in the now or in the moment, or you're not accepting your life as it is because you wish you would have done something else. So you're not actually gaining anything by not trying to do what you want to do. You're just gaining this idea of security. You're gaining the safety of being bored and wishing you would have done something else, right? And so if you start to frame things like that, you realize that there is no real risk. That life is about going after things and trying and failing and things not always working out how you want them to, or things not working as fast as you want them to. But that's just part of it. And you have to be okay with that. People, for years and years and years, people will work in situations that they despise just because somebody told them one time that writing was too risky of a career field. It's like, even if you truly have a 1% chance of succeeding, it's like, what are you actually giving up by trying? Especially if you're young. Now, if you're 50 years old and you have an entire established life somewhere, and it would be, extremely difficult for you to move from one location to another and try this whole new thing, then sure, there's a little bit more involved in that. But even still, it's like, okay, well, how do you want to live your life? That is what so much of this comes down to. How do you want to live your life? Because yes, things can go bad. Things go bad all the time, but things also go really good. And the more control you have over things, the more you have a plan, and the more you try to be serious and passionate about things, and the more you put yourself in a position to, take a step past a point of no return to where you either must succeed or this will just completely fail. It forces you into situations where you have to try seriously. And that's such a big element of it because so many people don't try seriously, and that's why they fail. And of course you're going to fail if you don't try seriously, right? And so, but they still add that into the statistics they like to throw around to scare you into not going after something that you want. It's so much worse, in my opinion, to live 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, your entire life, every night laying in bed being like, I wish I would have tried to be a writer. I wish I would have, I saw all these people making money in the stock market. I wish I would have just been able to invest a little bit. I wish I would. It's like, that is not a quality of life that you want. At least I don't think it is. And if you actually look at the downsides, you realize they're nowhere near as bad as you think they are. And sometimes it's worth, 5 years of really trying. If you take 5 years and really try and it doesn't work and you go, I'm not cut out for this, that is so much more than most people do. Most people never even seriously try for 5 years. Most people never seriously try ever for anything. They just sort of wade through it. What's that Thoreau quote? I think it's, most men live lives of quiet desperation. That really stuck with me. Yeah, David Thoreau. Most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Most people wish they could have taken a little bit of risk to maybe get what they want. Most of what you want is sitting behind, some sort of risk. And if you really reframe that, a lot of times, most of what you want is sitting behind something that you don't understand. And so it's not always about just action, which all that you should take action and just go for it. But it's also just about understanding what's going on, Like, if, back to the stocks thing, like if you were trying to invest in stocks, you learn about it for a couple months and then you put some money in. You don't, all chips forward, put all of your savings into this thing, but you put a little bit in, you start to get your feet wet and you start to build a portfolio, right? And then you realize that, I just needed to learn things. Everybody needs to learn things. That's part of life, Same with relationships and same with writing. You think you're a bad writer, and yeah, you are right now. So get better by writing and learning about writing. Like, that's just kind of how it works. And I want this to just be for, I know a lot of people who just talk about what they want. They talk about moving here. They talk about this job that they wanted to do. I know a lot of talented people that are like that could do what they wanted to do if they just gave it 5 years of actually trying, but they won't do that. And I don't want that to be you. This all comes down to continually framing your view on life and framing your view of yourself, and just having the confidence to say, hey, I can figure things out. You don't have to have the confidence to say, oh, I'm a genius. Oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to win 10 Oscars. I'm going to be this icon of history. You don't have to start there. You can just say, I can be confident enough in myself to know that I can learn something. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then you just take that step and you go forward and forward and forward and forward. Learn the first principles of the thing that you are worried about, or the thing that you want to do, but there's risk behind it. Learn the first principles and you'll realize that a lot of the risk is just your own ignorance. And you can go from there. So I hope that's helpful for you, and I will see you next week.